The Eagles are in a pretty good place right now today on March 10th. Do you agree?
They're in a damn good place. That's why I'm not a proponent of them running out, going to get Russell Wilson or going to get Aaron Rodgers or going to get any of these high-priced quarterbacks. I've been saying forever, and I go through it on Twitter with people. Every time I make a comment about it, every time that, I get into a discussion about it, the Eagles are not set from a roster standpoint to challenge for a Super Bowl as they are right now. Okay? That's a fact.
I could not wait to get my friend on here, Seth Joyner. By the way, man, his podcast is dope. They do a great job on it, Seth. That's one whale of a podcast you have, man. I loved it. It was a lot of fun. You got a lot of big names on it. Thanks so much for doing this for me, man. I really appreciate it.
You got it, man. I've been on hiatus. I decided, between my work in Philly, doing pre and post game for all the Eagles games and, doing a podcast, every week, man, I was just toast after the Super Bowl. So I kind of been on hiatus, since the Super Bowl, that Tuesday we did a show post Super Bowl. And since then, I just been trying to recharge my battery and get ready, for the new NFL year coming up here next Wednesday.
Absolutely. And let's start here. And let's start with the big news in the NFC East. What's your take on Carson Wentz going to a third team in 3 years and going to the Washington Commanders?
Well, it's for me, it's like the Little Rascals. Little Rascals always say they never learn. When I look at Carson Wentz, this is a situation where the kid, just can't figure it out. The same rhetoric and the same rumors that followed him out of Philadelphia into Indianapolis have seen to run him out of Indianapolis even after 1 year. You can't be upset with 37 touchdowns and I believe, 9 interceptions, but it's his play. What you saw in that regard isn't what was so upsetting as the situations and critical situations in games, some of the boneheaded plays that he made. And then, the whole, locker room deal and how you deal with, your teammates and how you deal with coaches and being coached hard and, being one of the guys and not, alienating yourself and, really stepping into the true leadership of the true leader of the team in that position. He just has not figured out how to master that yet. And I would surmise to you after 6 years in the NFL, if he hasn't figured it out, he's probably not going to figure it out. We're going to see the same thing happen, in Washington all over again. Listen, his last year in Philadelphia, I can remember after the fourth game of the season, pre and post game, I said, hey, the Eagles got a quarterback problem. And everybody thought that I had lost my darn mind, to make that assertion after what after the potential and what he had done to get them in position, to win a Super Bowl. But the one thing that, playing in the league for 13 years and being connected to it, for another 20 plus, the one thing you learn is you learn how to read players and read their body language and how their teammates interact to things that happen, in game, to you. And you could just see that, not only did he not have a full grasp of the team and the locker room, but he had begun to lose himself. And it just, perpetuated itself, all the way to week 12 when they finally made the decision, to bench him. And I thought it was a mistake to wait that long. I felt like if they would have did it earlier, that would have gave them time to rescue him and put him back in the game at some point. But when you wait till week 12, you pretty much, and then your first year backup quarterback goes in and beats the number one defense in the NFL, you're kind of stuck with the position that, hey, we got to stick with Jalen Hurts the rest of the way. And then, everything else went to hell in the handbasket real pretty darn quick.
Seth, I said this earlier, and I said it, to open the show. I said, this is a locker room thing, like you said. Mm-hmm. This guy hasn't grown up yet. He's too immature because, when you're in that North Dakota State, whomever, wherever it is, you're like the number one dude. There's no NFL guys you're playing against. Man, I had to look where North Dakota State up. I'm assuming it's in North Dakota. And he had everything given to him. And I said it with Barrett Brooks this morning. This has turned into a locker room issue because, like you said, you hear the same stuff in Indy that you heard in Philly. And when you hear you're not a good teammate, Tom Brady, when he got to Tampa, got all 90 guys' names, called every guy because he wanted to have a relationship with each and every single guy because he knew if he had to be critical, it was constructive instead of destructive. And that's, to me, it's one thing to be a DT and a quarterback on a team. You got different responsibilities. And then I asked Mark Trestman this question. I go, fundamentally, what's Carson Wentz's biggest problem? He goes, kick and throw the ball 70 yards down the field, Seth. He goes, ask him to throw a dump pass to a running back out of the backfield. He can't. That's why in that Titans game, he's moving his hand. He's looking uncomfortable. He has awful moments. But like you said, 27 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 3,600 yards, 95 quarterback rating. He's got nice numbers and brutal moments. Do you think Ron Rivera can fix him?
I think he's broken, beyond repair. And I could be wrong, but this is just my take from my experience. My experience is, you watch a player develop, and I would say that 95% of the players that are drafted in the NFL, Dan, they need 3 years to develop. Barring injuries and barring their development being arrested via injury, if they can be on the field playing for 3 years in a row, then by the time you get to year 3, year 4, you know what you got, and he's either going to get better or he's going to plateau. When you look at the situation with Carson, it's like, do you not hear the chatter? Dude, do you not hear what your teammates are saying? Do you not hear, what Doug Peterson was trying to get you to do? And everybody thought that, if he goes to Frank can straighten him out. Well, hell, if Frank can't straighten him out, what makes you think Ron Rivera is going to be able to straighten him out? Frank is the guy, I had always said that Frank was the voice of reason. When things were getting out of balance as far as run the pass was concerned, when Frank was still there, he was the guy that could get in Doug Peterson's ear and be like, hey, we need to balance things up. He was the guy that was controlling Carson. So now, things fall apart in Philadelphia. He goes to Indianapolis. He's got the one guy, that everybody thought that they could get him right. Okay. And he couldn't, for the life of me, I just don't understand it. He could not figure out, how to get this guy to open up his eyes and see. And listen, when he was in Philadelphia, I thought that, his time away because of injury is a great opportunity for him to learn to look at Nick Foles and look at how Nick Foles handles himself and look at how Nick Foles, gets everybody to buy into him, because Nick Foles makes it about everybody else and never about himself. And I thought that he could learn from that process. But obviously, you listen to the reports, there was a lot of animosity and a lot of jealousy on his part. And that's just not being able to grow up and just, you have the opportunity to talk to a Ron Jaworski and guys, who's been in the league, these veteran quarterbacks that can tell you the importance of you being the leader of the team, you reaching out to everyone. And listen, I don't think that Tom Brady, and I get what you're saying. I don't think that Tom Brady endeared himself to, all 90 Tampa guys so that if he had to be critical, they would understand that it was constructive criticism, so much more as that he wanted those guys to know, hey, listen, I came here to win. Okay. I'm not above you, in any shape, fashion, or form. I'm another player on this team just like you. I just happen to be the quarterback. I need you in my corner. I need to be in your corner. You're going to encourage me. I'm going to encourage you, so on and so forth. That's what being a great leader is really all about. It's really about it's your ability to take the onus off of you, okay, and make it about everybody else, understanding that you're the highest paid player on the team. You're going to get more of the accolades when things go right, and rightfully so. You're going to take more heat when things go sideways. But if you endear yourself the proper way as a quarterback, then those guys are going to lay out to make plays for you. They're going to run through a brick wall for you. They're going to pick you up when you get sacked. They're going to defend you when guys do dirty things to you on the field, okay? Carson Wentz just never got himself to that point in Philadelphia. He never got himself to that point in Indianapolis. And you could see the difference. When Nick Foles got sacked, every offensive lineman went to help him up. When he scrambled, and that wasn't many times that he did, his offensive linemen, his running backs, his wide receivers was there, to protect him. When Jadeveon Clowney hit Carson Wentz in the back of the head and it was a dirty-ass play, not one single player on that team went to Carson Wentz's defense. See, when you've been around the game as long as I have and you played the game 13 years, you see stuff like that, because if someone would have did that to Randall, okay, when I was playing, the defense would have came off the sideline. You understand what I'm saying?
That defense, hey, Seth, that defense.
We would have came off the sideline. I'm telling you right now, it would have been a whole bunch of fines going on in today's game. But you can't do that to our quarterback and think you're going to get away with it, because we're about to go upside your quarterback's head in a second. How about that?
Boy, man, you, Andre Waters, and all them dudes, man, I'd be very careful about rolling around with that gangrene. Let me get over now to the NFC here with Russell Wilson. Tell me if you subscribe to where I'm going with this. The Eagles sat back and got better, and it was a great day for the Eagles when Russell Wilson went to Denver, and here's why. You got one less dude now in that conference, and when you look at the conference, Seth, Green Bay's number 2 in salary cap issues. They got $48 million they got to get under by March 18th. You're talking Rams. They're $39 million over the salary cap. Dallas is in salary cap purgatory right now. They got to cut potentially DeMarcus Lawrence and Amari Cooper. The Eagles' position right now, because of what Howie did, and I know this is crazy for some people to accept, you're $30 million under the cap. You got 11 draft choices, 3 ones. You got a quarterback that stabilized the position. The Eagles are in a pretty good place right now today on March 10th. Do you agree?
They're in a damn good place. That's why I'm not a proponent of them running out, going to get Russell Wilson or going to get Aaron Rodgers or going to get any of these high-priced quarterbacks. I've been saying forever, and I go through it on Twitter with people every time I make a comment about it, every time that, I get into a discussion about it. The Eagles are not set from a roster standpoint to challenge for a Super Bowl as they are right now. Okay, that's a fact. I think that it's a misnomer, it's an anomaly, and it's really, really dangerous what the Rams did by going to get Matthew Stafford. And I think it's dangerous for the conversation to be like, well, look what Joe Burrow did. Okay. He got the Cincinnati Bengals to the Super Bowl. So you need an elite level quarterback to get that done. Okay. All along, the Rams had talent. Then they turn around, they bring in OBJ, then they bring in Von Miller towards the end of the season. 2 years ago, they went and they made a trade, for arguably the top cornerback, in the game.
Jalen Ramsey.
They've got, an Aaron Donald, potentially the best defensive player, in the game, arguably. So when they went and they got Matthew Stafford, they realized they had everything they needed. All they needed was a competent quarterback that wouldn't puke on his shoes in pressure situations. And that's why the trade was made to ship Goff to Detroit for Matthew Stafford. Okay. Let's jump over on the other side. Okay. You look at Joe Burrow. Now, I'm not saying that Joe Burrow isn't a major, major reason why, that team had the success that it had, because, you can tell the swagger that he brings to the game, the confidence that he has when he steps on the field, the enthusiasm, everybody buys into that. This is the type of leadership that I'm talking about that one Carson Wentz lacks, okay? But if all you had was Joe Burrow and you didn't have Joe Mixon, P. Ryan, Chase, Boyd, Higgins, Uzma, if you didn't have all those pieces, you're going to tell me that the Cincinnati Bengals would have went to the Super Bowl last year?
No.
Okay. So when I look at the Eagles and realize that from a talent perspective, their roster isn't close to what it needs to be for them to compete, and you got 3 first-rounders in this draft in April, and you got 11 total draft picks, which will allow you to improve your roster exponentially, and a rookie quarterback on a quarterback on his rookie salary, build your team. And then if Jalen Hurts proves not to be the guy after next season, then you take your draft capital and you go and you get the quarterback that you need, okay? But if you just go get a quarterback right now, if Aaron Rodgers came to the Eagles right now as their structure, if Russell Wilson came to the Eagles right now as their structure, they're not winning anything. They're still not good enough to beat the Dallas Cowboys twice in the division, okay? So that being said, yeah, you might get in as a 7th seed again or 6th seed, but guess what? You're going to get your ass bounced again the same way you got bounced this year by the 2 or the 3 seed, okay? So what is it that you're doing? Don't waste this draft capital, and people can't seem to understand that. They want hey, let's go get us a franchise quarterback, because guess what? That's what Cincinnati did, and they're in the Super Bowl. That's what the Rams did, and they just won the Super Bowl. Well, those teams were already loaded with talent and weapons, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And I haven't even talked about the defensive side of the ball. If you look at when the Eagles played plus 500 teams this past year or playoff teams this past year, they got their asses handed to them in a major way.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're right on the Bengals. Very underrated on how well that Bengals defense played. Let me go here with you on some free agents here. Bobby Wagner, and to me, hey Seth, you may think I'm crazy, but I still think this guy's got some gas in the can, man. I mean, boy, would I love to see him. Potentially a guy like DeMarcus Lawrence, if he gets cut, you weaken the Cowboys, and you get a good pass rusher at the right price if you're able to do it. I mean, would you go in free agency and would you try to go after a guy like Bobby Wagner? Because you're saying this to me all the time we talk, that for whatever reason, man, they got issues at linebacker. And I said this to a couple guys the other day. The linebackers on the Eagles right now, they're catchers and chasers. They're not hitters. They're not guys like you and Ray that put dudes in the hole on their back. They're catchers and chasers, because to me, they're not really in front linebackers, and they keep the game in front of them. They're chasing, you know what I mean? And they're reaching, and they're all those kind of guys. They're like gatherers, man. You guys were hitters, and it sets a tone. Do you go after a guy like Bobby Wagner to solidify that defense a little more?
Well, I think it depends on, what the cost is going to be, Listen, Bobby Wagner has been a perennial Pro Bowler, and, I think the interest is going to be, quite extensive for his services. I agree with you. I think he's got a lot of good football left in him. I think that, he got caught up playing against a defensive line that was pretty darn inefficient. And, when you got guys in front of you that's getting pushed off the ball or getting beat up, it's really, really tough to play the linebacker position, especially when you're playing only 2 guys, a 4-2 front. So there's an opportunity absolutely for the Eagles to improve that position. It just depends on, what the cost is going to be. I think that, DeMarcus Lawrence is a guy that changes the entire mindset of your defense, the way that he plays when he's healthy. I just don't think that, the kind of money that this guy's made and the type of player that he's been when healthy, I don't think that, the Eagles can afford it. Now, they're $30 million under the cap. How many other guys are going to go? How much other cap space can you clear that will allow you to, improve yourself in the free agent market?
Seth, they got 4 guys. From what I understand, Darius Slay, Hargrave, and Fletcher, they're trying to restructure contracts to try to get more, to be around 33, 32 million under the cap. Just to throw that at you there.
Right. But, when you think about the money you have to set aside for these, and one of the issues, I got a sense that Howie may trade out of one of these first round picks, because you got 3 of them. And you know how the first round salary is scaled. That's a lot of money. Not only 11 picks, but you're talking about 3 first rounders. While that all sounds great and whatnot, when you start to think about 11 draft picks and 3 first rounders and this draft alone, if they had like 60 million, I'd feel more comfortable about, their ability, to be much more active in the free agent market. But you got to think, my goodness, they're going to need half of that just for the draft picks if they decide to draft all 11 picks and then have to figure out how to get, 15, 16, and 19 in the first round side. So there's still a lot that has to be figured out, before, the draft rolls around. And, when you start talking about these players and more players, in my opinion, you're going to see more and more guys get released. There's going to be other opportunities, to commandeer or bring in some of these other players, who still have gas left in the tank, but financially their team just couldn't afford to keep them anymore. It'll be interesting to see, how active Howie actually gets and how creative he can be with a salary cap that, hey, you're under, but you're not under by a massive amount. And, you got a bunch of salary, you got a bunch of draft picks that you're going to have to take care of.
Couple last questions for you here, Seth. There was a report by Jay Glazer today that the Eagles had a deal on the table for Calvin Ridley before the whole thing happened with the gambling. And obviously that deal's now off the table. Do you read anything into that when you see him going after a veteran wide receiver like Calvin Ridley?
Well, they need one. They need one. They have to have one. And I understand the thinking because, Calvin and Devontae played together at Alabama. They're familiar with each other. I'm pretty sure, Devontae, probably stood up on a soapbox for that deal. But they need a veteran wide receiver to go along with all these young wide receivers to kind of, take them under the wing and teach them. It'd be one thing if you had a veteran quarterback like Tom Brady, who could, bring those young guys along. But you got a young quarterback that's trying to figure out his way into a starting, position of being a franchise quarterback. And then you got, 3 wide receivers, 4 if you throw John Hightower into the mix, that have all been drafted within the last 3 years. And you have no veteran presence there other than Deshaun Jackson for 1 year. And they need help there, and I hear all this talk about the Eagles potentially might be, looking at another wide receiver in the draft. And I tell people all the time, do you realize the Eagles have committed 13 draft picks to the wide receiver position in the last 12 drafts? You just can't afford to continue to spend that kind of capital and make mistakes to the degree that they've made them, because you're just burning draft picks. That every single time that they have to pick another wide receiver, that's another position that you don't get an opportunity to improve just because you made massive mistakes the last 5 years in how you drafted at the wide receiver position. They find themselves there again, and I think the best thing that they can do, because they're going to give Jalen Reagor another year. They're not going to cut him. They're not going to trade him. Nobody wants him, for what, they're not going to be able to get equal value for where they drafted him in return for the little production that he's been able to put up over the 2 years that he's been there. So they're probably stuck with him for another year. So they're going to have to go and get a veteran somewhere, in my opinion. Who do you go get? Mike Williams just got re-signed.
Godwin got tagged.
Godwin, even if he didn't get tagged, they weren't going to let him walk. You got Gallup, and the Cowboys are trying to figure out a way to get him re-signed. They don't want to let him go, especially if they make the decision on Cooper. So you got to start to ask yourself, some of the top guys, people have been talking about Allen Robinson, but, for the last 2 years, it's been unproductive. Is that because of, the situation in Chicago, or is the guy, tailing off? So there's a lot of questions that has to be answered, but I also think that, the wide receiver position is a position that needs to be addressed more so in the free agent market than in the draft, because they've already spent way too much capital at that position, in my opinion.
Again, 2 last questions here. I want to sneak one more in on you here.
All good.
What's the biggest need? Let's leave the quarterback over here, Seth.
Mm-hmm.
Edge rusher, dominant linebacker, safety, or corner, in your opinion, when you're looking at the way that they play, and you and I have gone over this, if you're 31st into the NFL in pass rushing, playing soft zones, dude, you're gonna put historic numbers up on the defensive guys just by your alignment. Just by your alignment. And what you were talking about a couple minutes ago, Seth, when you got 2 shitty guys in front of you, 2 D tackles, I tell people this all the time. The line of scrimmage for the scrape lane for the linebacker moves back 2 yards. He makes the tackle 3 yards. You give that running back a 3-yard stop, he falls forward 4 yards. You're giving up 4 yards of carry if you've got 2 bad dudes not understanding or not talented enough to play a position. It's almost like a scheme thing and lack of talent at certain positions on the Eagle defense. The need that you see the most.
Well, if they're going to continue to play the way that they play without implementing, some variety in what they do, they're basically a 4-man front. They'll get into some 3-man front, when they've got the game under control. They'll mix in some 5-man front, but they're highly predictable when they get in that front, because you bring in Avery. So he becomes a guy that you can add to the rush, or he becomes a guy that you can drop. And when you're in that look, you're either you're only thing you can play is zone behind it. Because who is Avery going to cover?
Right.
If
you got to have help back there.
Yeah. If he's going to be a true Sam backer, then that means you're going to line him up on the tight end, and then he's going to cover the tight end in man situations. They don't do that. They'll zone drop him, and he's like on an island, very uncomfortable. You can see that, he's out of his element, but they've got to get more creative. But if they're going to continue to do things the way they did it last year, then by far the most important position is edge rusher. They got to go and find a guy that can give them 10+ sacks guaranteed every single year, because they were just woeful, from a pass rush standpoint. You had Josh Sweat, I believe, that tied, Hargrave with 7.5 sacks, each. Dan, listen, my best year of sacks, I had 7.5. You understand what I'm saying?
I can't think. Who's the last guy on the Eagles that had double-digit sack numbers?
That's a good question.
I mean, I can't. You know what's funny? You were just talking about the receiver. The last guy was like Jeremy Maclin, that had 1,000 yards and 14 at the wideout. And your edge rusher, I can't think of a double-digit guy
probably
on that team.
Probably Connor Barwin. You might have to go back that far. Because I'm just trying to think. BG got close. He got the 9.5, I believe it was, the year before last. But he's never had double digits. Josh Sweat's never had double digits.
Fletcher had it in 18, 10-5.
Okay. Well, I just, you got to get better at the defensive end position. And I'm not talking outside linebacker, unless you're talking about a guy at the level of Von Miller or Khalil Mack when he's 100%. I'm talking about a bona fide true defensive end, 6'5", 6'6", 275 to 285 pounds. They can line up on the right side against every team's best offensive lineman and give him the business all day long. I'm not talking about a guy that's 6'2", 265 pounds, that's going to line up against Tyron Smith, who's 320, 325, and get beat like a little redhead stepchild all day long, and you might beat him with one speed rush the entire day. I'm not talking about that guy. I'm talking about that guy that's a difference maker. If they're going to continue to play the way that they play and not implement any kind of pressures into what they do because they're afraid of coverage behind it, then you got to get better on the defensive line.
Here, please tell me if you disagree or you agree with me on Jalen Hurts' upside. I don't think it's a big upside, and I'm going to tell you why. It's not because he's not going to get better, Seth, at reading defenses or his arm strength or understanding the game. The style of play is not upside. Here, RG3, Cam Newton, Michael Vick. He's already had an injury at the end of this year on an ankle. Look at Lamar Jackson the last 2 years. He's been banged up. Production has gone down every year from his MVP season. Seth, to me, it's not so much that Jalen's not going to be a student of the game. He's not a wonderful kid to have in there, and he's going to get better. The style of play doesn't dictate a high ceiling of play because, look, I mean, he got banged up this year too and missed the game. I mean, do you agree? I mean, it's again, all the intangibles. I think him solidifying it and calming the position down and putting some continuity at the position is all great. But it's not for long, man. Michael Vick, look at all these guys that played the position. They end up on a stretcher. Am I wrong?
Well, I think my greatest issue, with that philosophy is, one, the landscape is littered with players who the experts and the gurus of the game said that they couldn't, yet they proved them wrong. That's my first issue with saying what a guy can and cannot do. Because if that was my mindset, if I thought like that, or if I believed the nonsense that people said about me, then I would have never had the opportunity to realize my dream. So that's the first piece. You're
floating on a racial deal too, because a lot of the African-American quarterbacks coming out of college, you start limiting that part of the game too, Seth. Right. Then we start going back to the 80s again. You know what I mean?
Right. So my main issue is my main issue. I can remember when Lamar Jackson got drafted. And when he came out, I was on Speak for Yourself on Fox with Colin Cowherd and Jason Whitlock. And I kept saying, I hope that New England drafts him. I hope he gets drafted by New England. And they wanted to know why. I said, because he'll have the opportunity to learn how to play the game behind Tom Brady while watching Tom Brady under the tutelage of Josh McDaniels and Bill Belichick. I said, most of the black quarterbacks who come into the NFL, they come in with this skill set, like Randall Cunningham and Michael Vick and Lamar Jackson and Cam Newton and RG3, okay? So you go through high school and you go through college being the greatest athlete, on the field. And yeah, you can throw the ball, you can make some plays. The throwing game is different in high school and in college. But because you have the legs, you become a triple threat. And you can do some things that other quarterbacks who just sit in the pocket just purely they can't do.
Like Steve Young, right? Steve Young was a nightmare to defend.
Absolutely. But the difference is for me, I want to see these black quarterbacks be developed, okay? Teach them how to play the position of quarterback, okay? Teach them how to play from the pocket. And when everything else goes to hell in a handbasket, use your athleticism, to get out of the pocket and make something happen. But teach them how to pre-snap read a defense. Teach them how to go through a progression. Teach them how to get out of one play and get into a better play. I don't care whether it's a run play or a pass play. before you begin to rely solely on your athleticism, okay? Because sooner or later, the law of averages is going to catch up with you. If you're just going to be running around, sooner or later, it's going to happen. Now, I say that, but I also look at a guy like Josh Allen, because there was a lot of question marks after year one. And Josh Allen went to work in the offseason and came back a completely different person, completely different quarterback, a guy who could play from the pocket, a guy that made plays from the pocket. And when things went to hell in the handbasket, guess what? Now he's a threat, running the ball, okay? So now if Jalen Hurts can go and get that kind of instruction, and I always say the biggest mistake that the collective bargaining agreement made in only allowing OTAs and only allowed to hit a limited amount of times is, what it also created was now my quarterback doesn't have the opportunity to spend time with his OC and his quarterback coach in the offseason because he's restricted from doing that, okay? The greatest time of improvement for me was February after my rookie season, because I came in on the 28th of February and I was in Philadelphia from the 28th of February until the coaches went on vacation in June. And I sat in a room with Wade Phillips and we watched film and we went out in the field and we worked on stuff on the field, okay? And we watched film 5 days a week, okay? These players don't get the opportunity to do that anymore. So any improvement that they make in the offseason, they pretty much got to do it on their own because they come in and the OTAs are 3 days. What can you get done in 3 days? You got a young quarterback. He needs to be sitting with his coach so that they can look at film and go over what he's done wrong. If his quarterback coach is worth a flip and understands how to help make him better, he needs to be working with that guy every single day in the offseason on his mechanics and his footwork and where his eyes are and what he's looking and how to go through, a progression. So a lot of these players have been handicapped because they got to go outside to get that help. And there's not a whole lot of people out there that really knows how to coach that kind of stuff. So if Jalen Hurts can find that guy, that can teach him how to play the position from the pocket first, and then use your athleticism second, then I think that, over time he can get better. If not, then you're right. Seth, he's gonna be like all the rest of those guys.
Seth, you bring up a point that I learned from Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick went down to Jimmy Johnson's house, and I go, here's a defensive guy going against and teaching the greatest quarterback of all time. And Belichick's response to me was kind of interesting. He goes, no. Josh McDaniel works on mechanics and all that. What Brady and I do, we play a game of chess. Belichick will put in front of him, they're two tablets. It's like a game of chess, and they'll go like this. -20. No backs. They're in a Tampa 2. Where are you going with the ball? And these guys play these war games, and they play this. It's a different style, like you were saying, Seth, about Lamar going and learning about situational play calling and about situational plays and where you are. Belichick, from what I hear at the end of practice on Thursdays, he'll sit there and he'll go, hey, what happens? 2 minutes left in the ball game. Okay, onside kick. Group, let's see the group. He's constantly going over situations in the game so you're not surprised by what you see. To me, that is such a different way of coaching. Instead of just putting a game plan together and reading your playbook, okay, Brown set, no backs. If these guys are in weak side of the field, we go with this play. Like John Gruden has plays designed for his quarterback. Belichick has situational plays set up for. Remember, I told you, man, we went over that. How many times did you see those Patriot teams? They were so prepared always. Down in the red zone, don't reach for the goal line. It's a fine if you guys – all that stuff. I don't think a lot of players get coached like that today. They get coached like the old school way. Hey, here's double set, no backs. Hey, block and release on the tight end. and let's go with a brown set here, or a strong side set, or a weak side set, whatever. I mean, am I right? That's the difference with him.
Well, I'll tell you this, and just to close the whole Jalen Hurts thing, I think that, these coaches do a disservice to these black quarterbacks, by not developing their skill set. You come in, they draft them, and they devise an offense to fit their skill sets. Why not fit their skill sets to your offense and then allow them to, use their secondary, their main skill sets of being able to run, like I said, when everything else breaks down. Now, moving to your comment about Bill Belichick, if there's one thing that I could do different in my career now, knowing what I know now, I would spend a lot of time with quarterbacks on teams that I played with, and I'd have a lot of conversation with offensive coordinators about, okay, when you're calling plays, or when you're looking at a defense and you get a pre-snap read, what's your thought process? I want to get in their head and begin to think like they think. I think that's what made, Ed Reed such a great player.
Amazing.
I think that's one of the things that made, Ray Lewis such a great anticipatory player, because they were able to see things and look at the game. And because it's one thing to learn your job. It's one thing for me to learn my playbook. It's another thing for me to study film and begin to play the game from inside your head while you're trying to attack me. Okay. And if I know what to look at, if I know what things to key on, and I've conditioned myself, even when the quarterback looks over here, I know he wants to throw over there. I mean, Ed Reed was a master at that. You couldn't look that guy off. You couldn't look off Troy Polamalu. They wasn't buying that crap, So if and what Bill Belichick is doing, yeah, he spends time with Jimmy Johnson, and he leaves the mechanics to Josh McDaniels. But guess what? He's teaching his quarterback, what he knows about defense. And now that's what made Tom Brady such a great pre-snap quarterback, is because, if anybody knows every weakness in every defense, and if anybody who's seen every defense, that's a guy like Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick was a cover two shell guy. The Ryan brothers came in and coached under him for a while. He had some coaches, that came in with an aggressive mindset. He learned how to play. He learned other defenses. People don't realize there was a time where Bill Belichick would line up, when he had the players with Slade and McGinnis, those guys would line up in a 30 front, and the quarterback would go in his cadence and they slide down into a 40 front, and one of those defensive ends would put his hand down on the ground and just completely screw up the blocking scheme. So you're talking about a guy who's seen it all and done it all. The benefit is to the quarterback, because once he starts to talk to that quarterback about defenses, okay, because every defense has a strength and a weakness. And if that quarterback can understand pre-snap what that weakness is, he already knows where to go with the ball. He already knows what play to check to, even in the run game. He already knows, okay, they're in the even front. They're in the odd front. They're overshifted in the over. They're in the under, okay? They're in the even front. Do we want to run the ball? Because we already went through this in our meeting. When they give us this look, this is what we want to check to. And you're going to give that kind of toolbox to a guy like Tom Brady? You damn right he's going to win 7 Super Bowls.
All right. Hey, Seth, I'm gonna go out the door, and I promise you here's the last one. 1986 Giants, Gangrene, or 85 Bears? Who you taking?
Well, listen,
hey, you
biased.
can be humble.
I'm biased, man. I'm biased because I played.
Hey, Reggie's right there with LT, so I played with some of the greatest players to ever play on the defensive side of the football, man. And it kind of burned my ass a little bit. Chris Collinsworth during the Super Bowl. Oh, Aaron Donald might be the greatest defensive player ever. And I tweeted him like, "Are you out of your damn mind? Did you forget Reggie White? Did you forget Lawrence Taylor?" I'm like, I'm not saying that Aaron Donald isn't a great player. He ain't. Seth, he don't play to run.
Listen, he is not Reggie White.
No.
And he is not Lawrence Taylor. And he might not be Bruce Smith. Let's take it a step further. Okay.
Dude, I'm with you, man.
So,
I mean, that hump throw that Reggie had, I've never seen more all-pros thrown on their bonnet. And I used to ask Jerome, have you tried that? He goes, I don't know. He just gets his body in. And then when they lean on him, he comes over and swims them. I'm like, I have never – to me, I called that move like Kareem's skyhook. No one's been ever able to duplicate that thing. And when I heard them saying Aaron Donald's the best defensive lineman, I was like, man, that year he got drafted to the Eagles, when he came out of the Birmingham Stallions, I think he had 20-some-odd sacks in 8 games.
12.
Dude.
I remember. He had over 20 sacks in 12 games. Unbelievable.
Dude, that game brings my favorite defense. It's my favorite defense because you guys put the wood to everybody. Seth, I love you, man. Thank you.
You got it. We just don't get the love because we could never close the deal.
Yeah, well, you know what, too? I think the Fog Bowl, man. Jerome said he couldn't see shit in that game in Chicago. And he goes like this. Hey, I ain't going to say too much, but Randall couldn't see anything in that game. No shade.
Nobody can see it,
Hey, Seth, anytime you need me, please, man. I love talking with you. Thank you, my friend.
You got it, man. Take care.
You got it. Seth Joyner, the great Seth Joyner. Please do me a favor. Hit the like button. By the way, guys,